Hi everyone, welcome to episode 6 of the Bharatvarta podcast, a commentary on politics, policy and culture focused on India. So before we begin, I want to add, I hope you're taking good care of yourself and most importantly, you're staying indoors. These are exceptional times and it'll require much needed restraint for all of us to kind of tide things over. So anyway, this week we look at Madhya Pradesh and the political situation there. With Jyotiraditya Scindia's revolt and Kamal Nath resigning, what is the broader significance of all of this and what lies ahead, right? So to kind of discuss all of this in more detail, we're joined by Ashish Chandorkar, who is a leading business consultant, public policy expert, and a true son of the soil, born in Indore and swears by Poha. Hi, Ashish.
Hi, Gary.
And also joining us is Rohit Jairaman, who I'm told really loves cats, is a lawyer and a keen observer of politics and world affairs, and also a veteran of the Bharatvarta podcast. So Rohit, that thing about cats is true or not?
It's completely untrue.
Okay, baseless allegations. All right,
Baseless.
Welcome guys. Welcome, great to have you back. So Ashish, we'll start with you. Can we go back a little bit and focus on what led to all of this? Maybe you could talk about the broader significance as well and summarize the context for our listeners.
So, Madhya Pradesh politics has always been a bipartisan affair. Congress and the earlier variants of BJP have always been the leading parties in the state. The genesis of this actually goes back to how the state itself was formed. So, let me take a step back and let's just do a little bit of a recap of the history of how the state of Madhya Pradesh itself was formed, right? See, there used to be a state called Central Province and Berar in the British times. There were several princely states, notably the Bhopal was the largest one and was another large state. And then there were the Vindhya states, the states in the Vindhya region, which all existed at the time of independence. So, the state actually was formed in several steps. The states of Bhopal and Indore merged into the Indian Union only in 1948. A couple of last states to actually merge. In 1950, two developments happened. One was that the CP and Berar state from the British times was. It was dissolved in 1950. While another state called Madhya Bharat was created on the western side. So we had two large states, one on the western and the northern side, which is like Madhya Bharat, one on the current southern side of Madhya Pradesh, which is for CP and Berar. And by 1953, the CP and Berar parts of that also were, it was dissolved into two parts. The southern part of that, which is Vidarbha, went into the Maharashtra state. And what then remained was essentially there were several discussions about how do we organize the three or four larger parts which remained, and finally it all came together only in 1956 when the current state of MP was formed. So the way politics has always run is that there have been strong individuals from each of these three or four areas who have since dominated, or they or their families have since dominated politics in the state. Of course, MP was reorganized between Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh at the turn of the century. So that was another change which happened. But because of this structure, there have been several leading families in the state politics, each coming from a different region and being very strong in that particular. Their sphere of influence being from the region of their their origin. And because of this, both Congress and BJP, especially the Congress actually, BJP came in much later, but Congress had several satraps from each part of the state, going back to Pandit Ravi Shankar Shukla, whose family later became more influential in Chhattisgarh than in MP. We had Arjun Singh, whose family was from the Vindhya region. There was Motilal Vora, again more Chhattisgarh aligned. There were, of course, the Sindhyas in Gwalior. There was Digvijay Singh and his family from Raghavgarh. His father was quite active in politics as well, and the sons became politicians too. So basically, the politics was always influenced by these leading figures in the state. The The BJP part also was kicked off by the Scindia family only when Rajmata Scindia of Gwalior decided to support the Swatantra Party in 1967. That's how the genesis of Jansangh in MP was. And her family essentially was the founding. She was the founding member of BJP as well in 1980. So the Janata Party also owes its root to the same set of families and people largely. And the BJP leaders of today, the more influential leaders, of course, they all came grounds up. They were not from political families, but they only became stronger post 1977, or actually more 1980, after Jansangh was dissolved and BJP was formed. So irrespective of the party affiliations, the individuals have been very strong. Their role has been very strong in the state context, and they've always wielded influence irrespective of what party they have been in. So that is the larger background of the state politics, where no third party has been able to make a mark, mainly because they have not been able to rope in a local influential person or a family to really kickstart their quote unquote venture in this state. So it's always been a Congress and BJP battle. So it is actually no surprise that when Congress couldn't form a stable government and BJP lost out by a very small margin in the 2018 assembly election, it all collapsed pretty quickly, given the realignment of some of these individuals.
Okay, so let's talk about Jyotiraditya Scindia specifically, right? So what does he bring to the table? I mean, he's been a 4-time MP from Guna, his constituency, but he did lose the elections in 2019, right? So what has changed now? Rohit, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure, Carrie. So I think if you look at Jyotiraditya Scindia and the kind of politics that the Congress actually performs in Madhya Pradesh, and what building on from what Ashish said, see, Congress in Madhya Pradesh is pretty much a collection of satraps, right? In the sense that, and while this is true at some level nationally now, where the BJP actually has some sort of an ideological base and people actually join it for certain other reasons, the Congress, except in very, very small pockets of extremely urbanized India, primarily consists of satraps, and Madhya Pradesh is pretty much a hotbed of that kind of politics, whether it's Digvijay Singh, who has his Raghugarh and basically parts of Rajgarh district, and Jyotiraditya Scindia, who was powerful in what is known as Chambal Gwalior. And then you have Kamal Nath from Chhindwara and a few others, few leaders in the tribal belts, etc. So if you look at what happened in the last elections in Madhya Pradesh, that is 2018, the Congress pretty much swept the entire Chambal Gwalior region, and there were a lot of reasons for it, but one of the biggest reasons was actually the popularity of Jyotiraditya Scindia. As in, if you could see the kind of surveys that were done at that point of time, etc., he was clearly considered to be a person who was going to be the chief minister, especially in his region, and people did vote for that. And it was a very narrow win for the Congress, right? As in, it didn't even get a majority. And the biggest margins really did come from this region, where even in urban seats, the city of Gwalior, for instance, the BJP just about managed to sneak through in one of the 4 seats which cover the city. Shows the kind of support that the Congress managed to get in that election, and for some part of it definitely did go down to Jyotiraditya Scindia. Of course, he did lose his election in 2019 due to a variety of reasons, including, of course, the fact that the Modi wave of 2019 in some of these parts was actually probably stronger than the Modi wave of 2014. I think in all fairness, we should acknowledge that he was one of only 2 people who could survive the 2014 Modi wave in MP. And this time he lost out, while Kamal Nath, who won in 2014, his son managed to continue in 2019 in Chhindwara. But that's a different point. In essence, if you look at the 2018 results, Jyotiraditya Scindia probably of all the satraps contributed the most in terms of sheer number. There were other reasons in Gwalior, for instance, the SC/ST Act, judgment of the Supreme Court, its undoing by the central government, and its undoing by the central government both created huge issues for the BJP, as in there were anger against the BJP both from the Dalits and from the so-called upper caste, and both of that actually had an epicenter in Gwalior. So that definitely did help the Congress, but Jyotiraditya Scindia's popularity certainly did help there. And if you take the Scindia family out, this is one part of the state which has very weak Congress roots. If you look at it historically, and we'll get to that later in the podcast, but that to some extent also is a bigger problem for the Congress going forward. So just to sum it up, I'll say that Jyotiraditya Scindia leaving the Congress is a fairly big blow to the Congress. I wouldn't say necessarily that the same level of advantage the BJP gets, but it's a really big blow to the Congress in Madhya Pradesh.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. So one of the things that I want to also bring up is, aside from the ideological base, you cannot ignore the broader significance of dynastic leaders such as the Scindias or the Singhs or the Shuklas, right? Ashish, I know you touched upon this earlier as well in your opening remarks. Do you want to elaborate on this further?
Yeah, sure. So, dynastic politics is nothing new to the state of Madhya Pradesh. Let's take a few examples actually, and it's quite interesting how these families have been very influential, not just in the state politics, but for the country as a whole, right? So, Shukla, who was the first chief minister of the 1956 version of Madhya Pradesh, was a CM only for about 2 months before he passed away. But his sons, Shama Charan Shukla and Vidya Charan Shukla, are very well-known names in the country's politics. Shama Charan Shukla was the MP chief minister 3 times. Vidya Charan Shukla was quite notorious for his role in the emergency, in a time of emergency. He was considered one of the closest associates of Sanjay Gandhi. He in fact later switched over to BJP also briefly for one Lok Sabha election which he lost, and then went back to Congress. And he died a very tragic death in the earlier part of the last decade. So this is so their families have always influenced MP and Chhattisgarh politics. This is one example. There was Kailash Nath Kardju, who was the CM for more than 5 years in MP. The Kardju family is pretty well known. One of his sons, Brahmanath, was the Chief Justice of the Allahabad High Court. There was another son of Mr. Kardju who was also a judge in the same in the same High Court. The son of Shivnath, we all know Markandeya Kardju was a judge with Supreme Court in India. And his granddaughter was married to Shashi Tharoor, his first wife. So basically, I mean, the family has been very well known, again, not just in the MP politics, but again, nationally because of the judicial roots which the family had. Later on, after Kailash Nath Kardju, there was another CM by the name of Dwarka Prasad Mishra or TP Mishra. Again, a very famous, well-known name. His son, Brajesh Mishra, was the National Security Advisor in the Vajpayee government. Sudhir Mishra, who makes Bollywood movies, was the grandson of Pandit Dwarka Prasad Mishra. So these dynasties had a fairly firm grip on the politics, and I mean, of course, we'll talk about Rajpata Scindia also. Like she was married into the family in Gwalior, and then was pitched into politics because the way her own family situation and personal situation evolved. And she did support the Congress for a long time, but in the 60s, she realigned her political loyalties. Because of her role, MP got its first non-Congress government in 1967, when the Sanyukt Vidhayak Dal, or the agglomeration of all opposition came together. In fact, the Sanyukt Vidhayak Dal was like a experiment to the Janata Party as well, or like a precursor to the Janata Party as well of 1977. And in MP, it had mixed success. At the Sanyukt Vidhayak Dal government only lasted maybe for like a couple of years, 3 years maybe, before Congress again came in. And after that, Rajmata Scindia's move in MP helped lay the roots for Jan Sangh to really become a strong political force in the state. And if you take a later look as well, I mean, of course, apart from Scindia's, Arjun Singh, who was the chief minister in 1980s, starting 1980. I mean, I think he had a couple of terms as CM. His son also played a significant role in the state politics until recently. Let's look at the BJP side as well, or rather the Jansangh side as well. So the Janata Party of 1977, of which Jansangh was a key component, that came into power for about 3 years. In that 3-year window, there were 3 different chief ministers: Kailash Chandra Joshi, Virendra Saklecha, and Sundar Patwa. All their sons have been fairly active in the state politics. Some of them were even ministers in the Shivraj Singh government in the recent times. So when we talk about dynasties, the import in MP has been that yes, the sons and daughters are pretty active in terms of contesting elections, but not necessarily that they have been able to dictate the politics of the state. In more recent times, things have got democratized. Of course, the importance of satraps is very much there. The next generation is not as influential as it has been perhaps in UP or Bihar, but dynastic politics is very central to the root of Madhya Pradesh politics.
Yeah, thanks for that context, Ashish. I mean, it really lends sort of lays out the landscape for us, right? Rohit, you had an interesting point on specifically the role of Scindias and MP in general on the impact of Hindutva politics. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so Carrie, basically, if you look at how the politics of India has evolved since independence, it's primarily, as we all know, started out as a Congress-centric polity. And if you look at some of it, what happened is each state saw some sort of opposition to the Congress. For instance, in Bengal, it was the communists. In Tamil Nadu, it ended up being the Dravidian movement. In a fair few states, it remained one party for a long time, like, for instance, Maharashtra, which was one party almost till the mid-80s, but at a broad level. But one state where, the primary opposition to the Congress right from the beginning was Hindutva or Hindu nationalism, whether through the Jansangh or other parties, was the state of Madhya Pradesh. For instance, if you look even in 1952, what was then Madhya Bharat, not Madhya Pradesh necessarily, and I'll get to that distinction and why that's important right away. The only 2 non-Congress seats were both one in Guna, Gwalior by the Hindu Mahasabha. So that shows how, right from day one, it was really the anti-Congress flag here was flown by Hindu nationalists. This continued in 1957 also. Few seats were won, this time even by the Jansangh. And the same continued in 1962. Of course, a big movement here really happened with the movement of Rajmata Scindia to the BJP, which happened sometime in the 60s. While the Scindia family was always pro-Hindutva, as Ashish mentioned, for a variety of reasons, they had to support the Congress in the middle of the 50s during the time of Pandit Nehru. And Rajmata sort of changed track post in the mid-60s, I would say. She interestingly contested on both the Jansangh ticket and the Swatantra Party ticket in the 1967 elections, one for the Lok Sabha, one for the Vidhan Sabha, and she won both. And one of the great what-ifs of history is what would have happened if she had decided to stay on in the Swatantra Party and not stick on to the Jansangh. So what basically happened from 67 onwards really is that what is the Madhya Bharat part of Madhya Pradesh, that is your Gwalior region, your Malwa region, etc. The Jansangh really became almost a dominant party, especially from a Lok Sabha perspective. Very interesting result here is 1971 Lok Sabha, where the Indira Gandhi wave swept all over India. The opposition alliance and the opposition alliance in MP, for all practical purposes, was just the Jansangh and a smattering of Rajas who stood as independents. Actually won a majority of the seats in what is today's MP. The overall seats are, of course, sort of confusing because of the inclusion of Chhattisgarh, which was and to some extent today is also a relatively good area for the Congress. But if you look at what is today's MP, amazingly, this opposition alliance actually won the majority of the seats even in 1971, which probably explains why Indira Gandhi was, so happy and insistent on Madhav Rao Scindia joining the Congress post the 1971 elections. And if you look at all the results, except for the two big Congress waves of the 80s, that is 80 and 84, MP, especially the areas that were once under the Scindia family, that is not just Gwalior and Guna, even other parts of Chambal like Morena, Bhind, Vidisha, which is considered a huge saffron stronghold today, was it'd be interesting to know that the first time that seat was formed in 67 and Ramnath Goenka won the seat for the Jansangh, that was also due to the influence of Rajmata Scindia. Even Ujjain, which is another very strongly Hindutva dominated city, was also, of course, under the Scindia rule before independence, and obviously has some influence there even today. So if you look at it that way, Madhya Pradesh, even before Gujarat became so strong for the BJP in the 90s, was really the heartland of Hindutva politics in India. And that part of Madhya Pradesh, which used to be under the Scindias, you could say was the definitive, was really the heartland within the heartland. So to that extent, one can recap the contributions of the Scindias to this movement, which today is easily the most dominant political movement in India. And that's about it. Like Jyotiraditya Scindia joining is one more milestone to that extent, I would say.
Okay.
So Roshan, just to make an additional point, just to delve on the elections on the Lok Sabha side, right? As Rohit mentioned, even if you look at the 2004 and the 2009 elections, where the Congress was resurgent and largely driven by the gains it made in the northern part, even in those elections, BJP did very well. In both the election cycles. I mean, of course, 2009 BJP did lose some seats, but I think it was still 17-12 in 2009. 4 was BJP in the state from a Lok Sabha standpoint. So when we talk about the Hindutva politics as a binary, especially the kind of discourse which we today see on social media or even in national media, MP actually was not that binary. Because of the influence of all these folks, right from Pandit Shukla and Pandit Mishra on the Congress side also, and then of course Rajmata Scindia influencing the whole Jansangh politics in a big way. The Hindutva politics was very much accepted even in Congress, and in fact it is said, maybe someday he will write his autobiography, but it is said that Chief Minister Digvijay Singh won his second term because he had co-opted RSS to some extent in the state and brought in some very strict controls around cow slaughter and so on in 1998, which really helped him gain currency. So some of the agenda items which today BJP owns were very acceptable to Congress and MP all along. And this has been a very distinctive feature. Even in the 2018 election in Indore, one of the urban seats which Congress won, the candidate was actually a son of a old BJP leader and who had a lot of Sangh connections, right? So I think this ideologically BJP and Congress are much closer, and I mean Congress is much closer to BJP in the state, and that's been the case for a while. I think obviously there are some leaders who will always change the equation. For MP, that was Arjun Singh. He was also the big factor nationally in terms of moving the needle away from the Hindutva politics as such for the Congress in the 2004 government. But barring his influence, and then later on we are seeing second term influence in the latter part where NGOs became very powerful in MP, the state has been fairly aligned to what today we know as the BJP brand of politics.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. So this is very useful context in terms of what has happened and what's led to this, right? So let's look ahead. Ashish, I mean, just continuing, if you were to look in the crystal ball, right, what do you see ahead for the BJP or the Congress in MP?
Yeah, so as Rohit said, the exit of Jyotiraditya Scindia will be a big blow to the Congress itself because they have zero base in the Chambal region. In Malwa, which is the other Scindia influence area, maybe Congress has picked up historically earlier because of Prakash Indrasethi coming from that area, and then of course Digvijay Singh himself having a lot of influence. But on the in general on what used to be the old Madhya Bharat. In that region, Congress is going to suffer big time because of Scindia's exit. In the other parts of the state, maybe not as much, because more localized factors dominate there. But I think sentiment-wise, it's a very big negative for Congress. Will BJP gain? I mean, of course, there are only two parties, so BJP will gain by default. It may not gain so much as in an electoral strength sense, because the base itself is very high for BJP already. But the fact that Jyotiraditya Scindia, who's a very liked leader personally by the people in the state, irrespective of his party affiliations, I think that will be a big morale booster for the party. And I don't see how Congress will be able to displace BJP in the Chambal region going forward. BJP might also have a problem of plenty, by the way. There are some very good leaders in that area who may now find it difficult to get tickets, because they'll have to also, they'll be up against the Scindia loyalists as well. So some of the leaders who had left BJP in 2018 because they did not get a ticket then and were trying to come back or could have potentially come back will now find it very difficult to make their way back into the party. I mean, one good example is Samiksha Gupta, who used to be a mayor of Gwalior, did pretty good job in the city, but had quit the party before 2018 assembly elections when she didn't get the ticket to Gwalior South. And at that point, BJP lost that seat very narrowly, where Gupta polled like 20% of the votes. So I think such folks will find it very difficult to make a comeback. But otherwise, BJP should certainly gain in the Chambal area.
Yeah, Rohit, so do you want to add to that? I mean, Ashish mentioned, a problem of plenty for the BJP. Any predictions on who the chief minister will actually be? I know you're a Mamaji fan, but will they do a rejig?
Yeah, so Roshan, just before getting to that, I think I wanted to tie in two things Ashish had mentioned. And that is regarding, how the Congress itself has generally been a bit sort of aligned to the BJP's brand of politics in the state of MP. I think that is going to be a huge challenge for the Congress going forward, as it sort of nationally rebrands itself to become a much more left-wing, so-called progressive alternative to the BJP, especially under Rahul Gandhi. One of the states where that's going to really, in my view, take a toll on the Congress is Madhya Pradesh. While it may take a toll on the Congress in a lot of places, and it has, MP is definitely going to be a state, I think, where the Congress will really suffer on account of its national branding moving towards the left of the spectrum, and politics in general becoming more nationalized and people becoming more aware of what's happening everywhere.
Yeah. That's a very strange dichotomy, actually. I was going to bring that up, which is that, the national brand is, moving clearly towards the left. Left as, we define it culturally. But, MP still seems to be, as Ashish mentioned, very bipartisan about the whole Hindutva brand of politics, right? So go ahead, please. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, so coming to your specific question, I think, honestly, at this point, I would be very surprised if anybody other than Shivraj Singh Chauhan becomes a CM of MP from the BJP. While, as Ashish mentioned, there are a lot of leaders in the BJP, and there's clearly a problem of plenty, so as to speak, with obviously Kailash Vijayvargiya being a National General Secretary, being the most prominent other person, apart from, of course, Jyotiraditya Scindia himself. There's also Narendra Singh Tomar, who's been a very senior cabinet minister since 2014 and has not really moved at all from that position. But in terms of the CM of MP, I think for the time being at least, it's definitely going to be Shivraj Singh Chauhan for a variety of reasons. The biggest quite simply being that you would not want to rock the boat at a time when things are already unstable and there are 24 by-elections, so to speak, coming up. And the government has just, the BJP government will obviously be new and they would want to get into action right away. The other thing, of course, is that Shivraj Singh at a state level is a fairly popular leader, and his brand of being a people's politician does sell a lot in many parts of MP. And while obviously the other leaders are also popular in their own regions, again, Kailash Vijayvargiya's popularity in Malwa being a very big example of this. at this point of time, I think it would be difficult for the BJP to change from Shivraj Singh. Again, since I was referring to Mr. Kailash Vijayvargiya, fact that he's today the BJP in charge of Bengal, which is going for polls almost in slightly more than a year, definitely makes that and that's obviously the biggest election for the BJP in this entire cycle, I would say, of Lok Sabha, because winning Bengal would obviously be a game changer in more ways than one. So that I think would be the broad my view on who would be the CM. Ashish, you want to chip in on that?
Yeah, Rohit, I agree. For now, the BJP has to go with Shivraj Singh Chauhan as the chief minister. Kailash Vijayvargiya would have been a very strong contender. He has a lot of ground hold in the Malwa region, which is where the party did well even in 2018 on a relative basis. But given his role currently in the Bengal election, I don't think he'll get a chance. Other leaders who are very strong, like Narendra Singh Tomar, Narottam Mishra, Gopal Bhargav, Rakesh Singh, all of these folks may not get a chance to be the CM. I mean, they may play an important role in their respective areas, but potentially not. Won't a state which has been snatched from Congress may not be given to them. So, and of course, then we also have this uncertainty because of the coronavirus situation, right? So we don't know how long is this going to continue, whether it is whether the lockdown is 2 weeks or a month or more. We have no idea. So at this stage, someone who has had the administrative experience, who knows the bureaucracy of the state very well, has to take charge. So I think my prediction also is that Shivraj Singh Chauhan will be asked to take oath in the coming couple of days.
Okay, so we end on a consensus. So this has been great, guys. I mean, thanks so much for all of the insights that you've shared. Right. Thanks so much for everyone for tuning in. As usual, the podcast will be up on Anchor FM, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and a bunch of other platforms. Do follow our Twitter handle @BharatVarta for more updates. So until next time, do take care, and also please stay safe. Jai Hind.